There are aspects to all of us that we want to change at some point, and so often we run into this issue of, well, how do I go about changing that? So, in this video, I specifically want to go into the process of change, how you can go about it, and how you can actually change yourself overnight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what got me going on my change process, basically. I actually faced my first major loss when I was 7 years old. We had an exchange student come to live with us from Germany. She stayed with us for the entire school year, basically, and then went back home and almost immediately died of a brain tumor. And there was no indication whatsoever that she was ill or going to die, and it came as quite a shock to me when she did. And I remember my parents telling me and feeling so betrayed, like they'd hidden her illness from me, or that they'd been hiding her death from me, trying to protect me or something, when the reality is they didn't. They told me pretty much immediately after it happened that she died, and then my little sister was born like 2 months later, and then 9/11 happened a month after that, and it was a crazy, crazy year. I mean, so much changed when I was 7 years old. It's amazing looking back at just how much happened in that year. It does not feel like 1 year to me. But that event, that death, irrevocably changed me. I was never going to be the same person again after that. And so much of who I am today is based upon that circumstance. Because of her death, I have become the person that I am. And I'm very proud of the person I am, really. Now, I don't necessarily have everything that I want, but overall, I love myself. I feel like I have a good life. I feel like I do meaningful things. I feel like overall I'm heading in the right direction. So it just becomes a matter of nuance. I eventually will achieve my goals, because as long as I stick with them, it's inevitable. And that's a level of security that I don't think many people have. But given the way that it occurred for me, it was very, very immediate. Something happened, and then overnight I'm somebody brand new, and then it just shaped the rest of my reality. And so often that's exactly what's required for somebody to change. And the reason for that is because change is really freaking difficult. It's not difficult in that you may not be capable of it. It's difficult in that it requires a lot of dedication. It requires consistency. You have to choose who you want to be every single day for the rest of your life, basically. And eventually those decisions become easier, where you're like, well, this is just who I am. But if you want to change who you are, you have to make the decisions to change. And unless you want to go through a trauma, or unless you can predict the trauma and how you're going to react to it, you're going to have to decide that you want to change, and that's going to be a difficult path. So I understand why people don't change so often. It's a very big ask, and there are certainly things that I have no intention of changing about myself, despite the fact that they may not be perfect things. I just recently decided again that I wanted to lose weight, and it's been a very difficult process all over again, because the reality is you kind of have to reprogram your entire life. You have to readjust your food and the habits you've established since childhood to create a new mentality around health and living. So it's a massive undertaking, and any change that you're going to make to your life is going to fall into that same category, and you have to really, really want it, or be really, really dedicated to be able to actually go about getting that. Now, there are ways that you can establish dedication. There are ways that you can emphasize your resolve, or practice your resolve, or practice your consistency. And the way you do that is just every morning bringing it to your attention that you're making a choice. And that's why the first step in changing is deciding who you want to be. So figuring out who you want to be is not necessarily the easiest thing, but something to recognize, and this is something that I talk about with my husband all the time, is that who you are right now, is not innate. It's not inherent. And I know that a lot of people talk about how nature is an aspect of humanity, where there could be aspects of you that are natural bred, and you can't change them. But I don't think this is actually true. I think the majority of human behavior is going to be nurture, because human behavior is so dependent upon our social interactions. So from my perspective, who you are today, is actually a collection of things that happened in the past. Now, these could be things that you don't even remember. For example, you could have been molested when you were 1 or 2 and not have any memory of that event, but it could still be impacting who you are now because the trauma has remained, or there's a certain lesson you took from that that's not necessarily in words or in memory that has stuck with you, despite the fact that it's not in words, because you still have the emotional memory in your body. So there are things that can happen in your past that you don't necessarily remember that shape who you are even now. It's going to be kind of hard to figure out what those are, and that's kind of where therapy tends to work. But I'm of the mind that you don't have to go through therapy in order to change who you are, because you don't need to overcome your past. You just need to choose not to let it influence you. And that means deciding who you want to be and then letting go of who you used to be and saying, that's not who I am anymore. And all you have to do is just say over and over, that's not who I am anymore. I choose to be this instead. So if you want to be kinder, you just say, I choose to be kinder today. I choose to be a nicer person. If you want to be healthier, you say, I choose to be a healthy person today. And by deciding what you want and then choosing every day to be that person, you will gradually become that person. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to combat me on this, where they're like, change isn't that easy. You can't just change like that. It's impossible. But have you ever heard a story of an amnesiac? I remember watching this show called Samantha Who, where basically she's lost her memory. I don't remember exactly what happened to her, but she's lost her memory. She has amnesia, and she's relearning how to live her life. Now, there are some things about her that are the same as when she, was her old self. But she actually develops a brand new personality through this process. She falls in love with the guy that she used to date and broke up with. And she's a much kinder person in this second stint than she was before. She used to be kind of ruthless, going after everything that she wanted, not caring who she stepped on. And then from this new perspective, she looks back at her old life as the memories return and is horrified by what she discovers. And this is exactly how we can live our life. Just pretend for a moment that you have amnesia and have no memory of who you used to be. Can you figure out who you want to be and create a new personality to go along with that? And I would say absolutely. You can choose a kind of voluntary amnesia and say, I am not that person anymore. That is not me. Which isn't to say that you're avoiding the issues that you have. It's just to say that you don't want them to influence you anymore. So you're like, I have this trauma in the past and it's stuck with me. It's traumatic. Like, it's amazing to me how many people in my life have been raped. It's crazy. This should not be happening. But how do you fix that problem? And that's a very, very difficult, complex situation to try to fix, because you have to change both the men and the women. You have to fix the hurt that the women are feeling, and you have to fix the psychology of the men, and it's just, where do you start with that? And I personally am of the mind that hurt people hurt people. So if somebody rapes somebody else, that means there's something psychologically wrong with them, and that needs to be fixed. Now, how you fix it is a challenge, because you could force them into therapy, but what if they don't participate? What if they don't put in the work? So this notion of change, you have to choose it for yourself. And to some extent, you need to change the whole society to where, sexual gratification maybe isn't quite as important, and that's a very lengthy process. So figuring out how to solve the rape issue is very, very complex, and I don't necessarily know how to do it. I have some theories, but it's going to take more than me. Certainly, it's going to take a whole societal change. It's a very, very big project. So all things considered, you have to then deal with the victim. You have to say, well, you've been through this trauma, but do you want to live your life constantly in fear that it's going to happen again? And if it does happen again, how are you going to deal with that? Are you just going to live your life in fear, and then when the same thing happens again, continue to live the exact same way forever in misery? Like, that guy just won now. He controls you, even though he's not even there. So I get that this is hugely traumatic, and I don't think anybody should go through it, and I don't want anybody to go through this, and I am very sorry if you have been in this circumstance. But at some point you're going to have to say, how do I want to live my life? And when you decide, I don't want to be led by fear anymore, life gets a lot easier. And I know that this can sound like just words to people, and you're going to have to decide for yourself at some point because I can't give you enough information to make you understand what I mean. You kind of have to live it to understand the perspective. But I know that for me, I regret every decision I've ever made out of fear. And the reason I regret it is because I know that I was not living up to my full potential. I was not being the best version of myself. And I would much rather do my utmost to be as amazing as I can be. So in many ways, when I choose something out of fear, I feel like I'm letting myself down. I feel like I'm letting the world down. And I feel like it's a poor decision, even if it turned out well. So I choose, even though I'm afraid, to continue down the path toward the person that I want to be. And that's what I would encourage anybody to do. So I know it's not easy, and I know that letting go of past hurts and traumas is very complex, and that it may be a lengthy, arduous process. But I do genuinely think you'll be better off if you can do this. So that's the path to change. Figure out what you want, who you want to be, and then choose to be that person every day until it sticks, basically. And I know that, just extending onto this subject, I know that a lot of people are like, but I can't change that. I'm not capable of change. I'm stuck. I'm just who I am, and that's who I am, and that's it. But we know from research that who you are, like attraction, who you're attracted to, is actually based on familiarity. So the more exposure you have to something, the more it becomes you. And that's why the idea of who you surround yourself with is who you become. You become the collection of the 6 people you spend the most time with. That's the concept out there. Attraction is built based upon familiarity. That's why we have this concept of men marry women like their mothers and women marry men like their fathers, because that's what they're most familiar with. You obviously can change that, and that's through repeat exposure. And there are some theories around, like sexual preferences that I have that extend far beyond just, male-female relationships as far as that's concerned. I don't necessarily know the nuance of that, so I'm not going to say this is for sure solid proof. But the idea that we are attracted to things because we're familiar with them seems to be absolutely true. They actually did studies in this book. I mean, they did studies outside the book, but he used the study in the book called Hidden Influences. There's no bubbles in here. You can go upstairs and ask Grandma for bubble mix. But there's this study in the book called Hidden Influences, where they took 3 women and had them participate in college classes for a certain number of days. One woman attended the class more often, another one attended about middle amount, and then the last one attended like 1 or 2 classes. And then when they interviewed the students of that class, they discovered that the woman who had been in the class most often was considered the most attractive. Now, they also interviewed people who hadn't been in the class, and they discovered that there was pretty much equal distribution amongst the 3 women outside the class. So pretty much everybody in the class found the familiar face more attractive than the control group did. So that kind of indicates that there's some validity to this, and whether you believe it or not, I guess it's up to you. But that does show a certain level of familiarity tends toward who you are or your behavior. You become that which you interact with or do or talk with or behave like most. You can become pretty much whoever you want to through repeat exposure. So you're not stuck as you are. You're not made this way and there's no hope of changing it. If you're a pedophile and you hate that about yourself, you're not stuck being a pedophile. And I know that people are going to hear that and they're going to be like, oh, how dare you be considerate of pedophiles? But how else are we supposed to help these people fix themselves? How are we supposed to get rid of pedophilia if we just shunt them off and decide we're not going to work toward fixing that? So that's kind of the mentality I come from. But you are not stuck. where you are. You're not stuck with whatever it is that you don't like about yourself. You can literally choose to change it. And the way you change it is through repeat exposure of that type. So if you're attracted to children, for whatever reason, probably some kind of psychological trauma in your past, you can choose to find older women attractive. And you can say, today I will find older women attractive. And then you go out into the world and you look for reasons to find them attractive. And you do that enough times, they will become your default. You will find older women attractive. So I know that it sounds super duper simplistic, but it really can work that way. And that's pretty much how change works for anybody. And we have no clue how far this can extend. So I would say experiment with it, see what works for you. But all things considered, don't give up on yourself, because if you don't choose to change, you will never become that person. You have to decide, I'm going to try this, and then work toward it and see what happens. And there's no giving up allowed, because giving up just puts you right back where you started. So you might as well just keep trying, keep experimenting, and see who you can become. Because I can pretty much guarantee you, if you do this, if you continue to grow who you are as a person, if you continue to choose a better version of yourself, we will have a truly amazing world to live in just a couple years max. It's going to be great.